Good morning. My name is Mark Kamimura-Jiménez, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and the Dean of the Center for Diversity and Inclusion at Washington University. Thank you for joining the Ringing of Their Names virtual vigil at Washington University in St. Louis. This vigil will be recorded to provide an opportunity for students, faculty, and staff who cannot join us to reflect on this moment at a later time. I want to note that today is Breonna Taylor's birthday. She would have been 27, and to celebrate her, we must say their names, because in the ringing of their names, their lives and stories and their spirit remain. So we gather for this vigil to say their names, hear reflections from members of our university community, and observe a moment of silence as we honor the Black lives, cis and transgender, who have been murdered in recent months. I now invite Chancellor Andrew Martin to provide his reflections.
After George Floyd's death, his brother Terrence Floyd requested for all to ring his name, which is the reason we are here today, to mourn the tragic killing of George Floyd, Nina Pop, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Sean Reed, Tony McDade, the named, and those names and stories unknown, and to use their deaths as a chance to reflect, move, and act. Thank you for joining us for this time to gather together as a community that abhors racial violence and uplifts the values of racial equity and inclusion. While I cannot pretend to fully understand the feelings of sadness, outrage, and horror our colleagues, students, friends, and family members of color must be experiencing during this time, I must admit that I myself have been in a constant state of grief these past few months, and especially these past 2 weeks, as I think about the ways both this pandemic and the systems we have in place serve to increase disparity, inequality, and Black death, rather than minimize the gap we've been working centuries to close. I grieve for all people of color, but right now in this moment especially, I grieve for our Black community, our Black colleagues, students, friends, and family members who continue to be targets of hate, racism, and police violence. I grieve for Black individuals who leave their homes in fear. I grieve for the Black adolescent youth trying to make sense of their identities and actions in this era of injustice. I grieve for the Black children who must learn how to interact with authorities in a way they should never have to. I grieve for the Black mothers and fathers who have pits in their stomach at the sight of any unknown phone call, those who can't rest or sleep until they know their children are safe in their homes. I grieve for my Black colleagues and our Black students who are members of this community and experience burdens every day that I cannot begin to imagine. I grieve for a society divided and polarized by these issues, a society hungry for change, yet paralyzed by political division. I grieve for these things and so much more, and mixed with that grief are feelings of outrage, sickness, and despair. Yet I know these feelings are part of the entire process, and they are part of the recipe for change, the fuel keeping many of us moving forward and demanding change and action. Here at Washington University, many of us are mourning, and many of us feel angry and helpless. And in this moment, I challenge us to channel that energy toward the greater good. I challenge us not to sit for too long in our grief, and instead to stand up to racial injustice and be the leaders of change, all while we undoubtedly continue to experience feelings of loss. As I said in my statement earlier this week, we must take action. This includes not only supporting our community, but also doing what is at the core of our mission, leveraging our activities in support of research, teaching, and patient care to make a difference in helping to forward the cause of racial and social justice in our community, our region, and around the world. Many of you are already standing up. You are on the front lines of protest. You are calling your community leaders and volunteering for community positions. You are writing new policies and organizing forums. You are pointing out inequality and disparity in the classroom and through your research. You are providing compassionate service and patient care to those who lack proper access. And you are talking with your children about race and injustice. I am extremely honored to be part of a community where many are actively in pursuit of these and other new initiatives. And now it is time to do even more. to double down on our efforts and continue to uplift our mission to improve lives as we work to enact change in the region and throughout the world. At Washington University, this is how we will continue to ring George Floyd's name. As Chancellor, I can promise you that we will do our best to ring his name as loudly as we possibly can to ensure the arc bends towards justice. And we will not stop ringing until justice wins. Thank you again for being with us, and thanks especially to our colleagues and students who have helped contribute to today's event. And now I would like to invite our speakers to share a few words.
My name is Kiarra Womack, and I am a senior at Washington University in St. Louis. Today, we are remembering a continuation of atrocities created by an indifference towards Black life. So many people of African descent have died at the hands of police officers, bystanders, and people that harbor hatred for others. It seems that hatred never ages, and we continue to lose so many because of it. George Floyd, Nina Pop, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Sean Reed, Tony McDade, Michael Brown, a list that never ends nor continues, and always continues. Names that everyone has not heard before, and some stories that we will never know. My heart and prayers goes out to all the families that have recently and in the past lost a mother, sister, father, brother, and any other family member due to these avoidable murders. I am blessed to be here talking today, but I recognize that I will not be able to say everything that needs to be said, and that there are so many important voices missing today. But I hope still to speak about a few things from my perspective and community that I have found to be important to share at this time. Audre Lorde speaks on the experience of people of African descent and states that we were never meant to survive. I would add still, because no matter how much we shout, I can't breathe, or we try and go for a jog, sleep in our house, walk in our backyard, read in our car, walk home from a store, even talk to the police, Black people still die. Still, because the violence is continuing to be perpetuated to people at peace. As we speak, it is happening right now across the world. There is still violence against Black people for no reason at all. We are sad, we are angry, and we are tired. I demand justice for all Black people that have lost their lives to police brutality, not just cis, straight, and able-bodied Black people. The current police structure must be defunded, amended, and potentially abolished. Law enforcement was never created to protect Black trans women, Black LGBTQ plus people, Black disabled people, Black children, and all Black people in between, especially those that the media ignores. We must find another way to better protect our communities. White supremacy, over-policing minority and Black communities, and a very militarized police force has led to so much death and destruction of Black lives. We as individuals can start with empathy and understand that any lost life due to this fixable problem is unjust. Things you can do to promote the Black Lives Matter movement are sign petitions in support of the families seeking justice, vote in your local government as well as primary elections to choose those that support Black lives, join peaceful protesters, call police departments and demand for justice. Check on your Black friends and don't ask for explanations of their struggles. Instead, take it upon yourself to learn about it. The WashU administration can focus efforts on giving donations to Black-owned organizations that support the Black Lives Matter movement and take away the militarized weapons used by UPD, lessen the amount of police officers that surround WashU and haunt the students. Black people are not enough to be the only ones looking out and supporting other Black people. Allyship is important. Performative allyship is detrimental. Allyship, when done right, should be one of the most thankless roles you can have. You should not look for nor receive a medal through any medium for standing by someone's side and promoting them having the same basic human rights that you yourself have. I stand in solidarity with those trying to stop the heinous crimes of police brutality on innocent people. And if you really care about the Black people in your life that you claim to love and support, then you should too. As human beings, Black people have the right to live, and the world needs to act like it. Thank you.
My name is Peter Ogunniran. I am a rising fourth-year PhD student at Washington University in St. Louis. I didn't want to talk about this at first because I'm Nigerian, and I felt I wasn't in a historical context or historical situation to speak about this topic, being Nigerian. So I referred a friend of mine to talk about this, and she didn't want to talk about it. So I had a rethought and told myself, I actually do need to talk about this because after all, in America, I'm not Nigerian, I am Black. And I remember the first thing I learned after I got my paperwork before coming to the US. I had a friend who called me aside and spoke to me and told me, look, there are two ways to learn. Never choose the hard way. In America, you can make mistakes that can cost you your life. That could be the hard way to learn. And I remember my friend teaching me how to react when the police ever pull me over, or if the police ever pull me over. It makes me worried a lot. And I worry about myself, how I react to people, how I act, how I walk, how I do things in every situation, in every context. It makes me worry about the friends I have here, the people I know here. I have a younger brother who also is studying in the US, and I worry a lot about him, how he walks, how he talks, how he does whatever he does. I worry about myself. I worry about friends. I worry about people because, again, there are two ways to learn. Never choose the hard way. It could cost you your life. And it makes me wonder about people who have been here for generations, how much they have to worry. I've only been here for about 5 years, but I worry about myself and my brother and the friends I have. But when I think about people who have to worry about their daughters and sons and uncles and aunts and nephews and nieces and bigger families because they've been here for generations, it bothers me a lot. And it makes me ask myself a lot of times, what did Black people ever do to deserve this? What did people of color, people of different gender orientation ever do to deserve this? What did the indigenous people ever do to deserve this? I was raised in a Christian home. As a Christian, you have to love everyone, regardless of what happens. But since I came to the US, honestly, I have been strongly doubting my beliefs because, after all, it says this is a country founded on Christianity, religious, and everything. In God we trust, we're godly. But I ask myself a lot, where's the God element in all of this? Where's the love? If you cannot love me on earth, when are you going to love me? If you cannot treat me right on earth, when am I going to get that treatment you talk about? It makes me doubt my faith as a Christian, honestly. And I ask myself, well, they teach you that there's a place called heaven where there's going to be peace and harmony. But if I cannot have peace of mind here, if I have to worry about what I do, how I do, because I can make a mistake, my friend can make a mistake because of how they do things, and it could cost them their life, how do you want me to believe there's a place called heaven and there's going to be peace and harmony if we cannot have peace on earth here? Is there going to be racism in heaven? Segregation? Bigotry? How about we just start loving here on earth? It bothers me a lot. Again, in America, if you come here, you are not Nigerian, you're not Cameroonian, you're just Black, regardless if you're from the Caribbean, if you're from South America, if you're from Africa, you're just Black. Again, I ask myself, what did Black people ever do to deserve this? Thank you.
The long summer of Black death. In August 1955, during a long, hot Mississippi summer, 14-year-old Emmett Till was infamously tortured, brutalized, and murdered by two white men. It was explicit in public knowledge that they did so because he was Black, because they bragged about their depravity to their friends and to their neighbors. They were white supremacists, although that almost exceptionalizes their brutality, because at bottom, they were just white Mississippians. When Emmett's body was found in the Tallahatchie River with his eye gouged out, a bullet in his head, and dragged to the bottom of the river with a cotton gin fan tied to him with barbed wire, authorities whisked it into a pine coffin, nailed it shut, and planned to bury him and their depravity in Mississippi. His mother, Mamie Till, an unsung civil rights hero, insisted that his brutalized young body be sent home to Chicago and that the casket at the funeral be open. The picture of her in a mother's Sunday best, grieving over her son's broken body, became an international symbol of the uniquely American commitment to hatred of Black people and the horrors this nation was willing to inflict on our bodies to remind everyone of it, especially us. But it certainly did not end it. Emmett Till was not killed by the police, but the entire set of state actors, police, prosecutors, judges, the entire system of criminal justice designed to protect the sanctity of the individual and to safeguard democracy refused to convict the two racial thugs who bragged about their joyous murder of this young Black boy. We know that the murders of Trayvon Martin and Ahmaud Arbery are on a continuum of racial hate with Philando Castile and George Floyd and Michael Brown. During the summer of 2015, Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Claudia Rankine published an op-ed in the New York Times about the American fetish for murdering Black people, entitled "The Condition of Black Life is One of Mourning." And it is. We mourn Emmett Till. We mourn his mother, Mrs. Mamie Till, who thought that if the nation saw what white hatred had done to her son's young, tender body, perhaps we would stand up. We didn't. Instead, we wring the names of those who continued to be murdered by the state or by its inaction. How many Black bodies does it take for one Black body to matter? Today's moving pictures, today captured on cell phones, have replaced the haunting, tragic picture of Mamie grieving. For some, these videos are the ultimate racial pornography, racial snuff films that fulfill their racial fantasies. What do they mean for the rest of us? We didn't answer Mamie Till's call in 1955. We didn't answer the calls of any of the names we have rung. If Claudia Rankine captures Black life as a condition of mourning, Ellis Coase captures it as a state of rage. In his book, Rage of a Privileged Class, he explores how professional Black Americans, like myself, experience life in a racist country that both needs us and despises us. I cannot speak for my fellow Black colleagues at Washington University, but I suspect that I am not alone in waking up every morning with a sad sickness about America's hypocrisy. Unlike totalitarian states that announce their repression and their laws and their values, the United States uniquely erected a nation at once committed to enslaving and brutalizing Black people and announcing to the world its aspiration to be the first modern democracy and one built on the sanctity of the individual. Mourning and rage, grief and anger, despair and damnation. It is yet another take on W.E.B. Du Bois's still prescient trope of double consciousness. 65 years after Emmett Till's torture and murder, we are in yet another long summer of Black death. I cannot say when it started exactly because Black death in the United States never really ends. It more sort of rolls into hills and valleys, and the hills can become so high that the valleys begin to become normal. In the last 3 months since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we have beheld almost every iteration of Black death. We have seen the murderous neglect of healthcare systems, the disposability of so-called essential workers, the emergence of racial comorbidities into the lingua franca. We also have seen the Black death of the nation's continued commitment to racial violence. What would it mean for this season, this unbearably blistering hot season of Black death to end? Some people call on us to deepen our commitment. Let me say this. We cannot deepen the commitment anymore. Our commitment cannot be any deeper. I was heartened when the Chancellor shared that he had initially hesitated to make a statement because he wanted action. We have to act. The Chancellor has called the university to action. And what would it look like if Washington University put the same energy into ending structural racism that we put into curing cancer? We helped to put the rover on Mars. What if we put the same resources into bringing white supremacy to its knees? What if undergraduates came here to learn to major in anti-racism in the same numbers they came to major as pre-medical students? What if we gave the faculty the resources it needs to do path-breaking, pioneering research that will change the future of race and racism in our country? What if we decided to invest in our Department of African and African American Studies to make it best in class? What if we acted on the resolutions we have made, the reports we have commissioned, and the initiatives that languish? From our grief, from our rage, there are only two things left: action or despair.
Thank you, Chancellor Martin, Kiarra, Peter, and Vice Provost Davis for your reflections. My name is Reverend Callista Isabelle, and I serve as the Director for Religious, Spiritual, and Ethical Life at WashU. There are times to speak up, to raise our voices in shouts for justice, times to cry out with those who are suffering and to demand change. And there are times when we hold silence in remembrance of those who have been killed. I now invite us to share in 5 minutes and 25 seconds of silence. In these 5 minutes, 25 seconds, we remember that on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police officers. We also remember those whose names ring in our ears and those whose names we do not know. In holding silence, we bear witness to the truth that Black lives matter. During this time, I invite you to reflect on the lives of George Floyd and others who were murdered in recent weeks or months. I invite you to lament, to grieve, to reflect, or pray. You may use these moments to stay still, or perhaps to write down an action to which you are willing to commit in the ongoing struggle for justice. The silence will begin and end with the bell rung 3 times. We ring their names, now in silence.
My name is Rob Wild, and I assumed the role of Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at Washington University on Monday. As an alum of the university myself, I'm grateful for this opportunity to serve and support our students. In closing our event today, I want to share two quotes that I read this week. The first was by Brian Stevenson, the civil rights attorney and social justice activist, who repeated a quote in the New Yorker this week that he's been saying in media interviews the past few years. Mr. Stevenson said, "Slavery didn't end in 1865, it just evolved." With the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, and the many others before them, we have seen in America a stark reminder to all of us of the truth in this statement. Slavery didn't end in 1865, it just evolved. When Black people in our country walk the same streets as I do, go to the same stores I do, go to the same places I do, and have to live in fear that they will be killed by the police, then we must own that we have a serious problem that we share responsibility to confront together. The second quote comes from one of our own students, Miriam Silberman, a sophomore and the Speaker of the Congress of the South 40, who wrote in a letter this week to her fellow students that we must, quote, ask and listen. If Black folks are telling you what they need and what could help them with the cause, truly listen. Then take action with what they have told you. For white people like me, this is a very important statement to hear and understand. We heard from Kiarra some suggestions for taking action as an ally today, and I pledge to continue to take action both as an individual and in my role as an administrator at the university. I invite my colleagues and our students to join me. For white people like me, this is not the time to defend ourselves, saying that we're not racist. It's not the time to feel guilty or to engage in philosophical debates about whether systemic racism exists at WashU or not. We know that it does. This is not the time to argue about whether the term white supremacy is offensive to white people. We must acknowledge the fact that we live in a world where some people don't believe that Black lives matter. And we must fight every day against hate and violence that is all around us and work to create the world and future we want to live in. So I close with this. This is a time to listen, learn, understand our privileged identities, and use that privilege to take action. I want to thank my colleagues at the Center for Diversity and Inclusion for organizing this important vigil. Taking action means learning about the opportunities to engage, and there are many opportunities that you will hear about from the CDI in the weeks and months ahead. We need to take collective action. Please join us. Thank you.